You're listening to Founder Sessions, a podcast that helps people relate to the reality of startup life. My name is Carl Murray and I am a startup nerd. In each session, I will chat to entrepreneurs about their ideas, their stories, and the challenges they face throughout their journey. What's up everybody and welcome back to Founder Sessions. Joining me today is Kufa Matiya, the founder of FutureMatch. Kufa is a two-time founder who scaled his first startup from a team of 2 to 45 and raised over 1.4 million in funding. Kufa is passionate for entrepreneurship, tech, and building teams. In this session, we talk about that experience of scaling a startup, the challenges that Kufa tackled throughout his journey, and we talk about the top skills you need as an entrepreneur. All this and more in session 22 of Founder Sessions. Kufa, welcome to Founder Sessions. How are you doing?
I'm very good, Carl. Yourself? How are you?
Good, yeah. Britain is experiencing a bit of a heat wave at the moment. We don't know whether to. We don't know what to do when the sun comes out, do we?
No, we never do. I believe it's going to be like 40 degrees. It's supposed to be a national heat wave warning emergency or something like that. Who would have thought that, right? So it's unexpected.
So Kufa, thank you for coming on the podcast. Let's dive straight into it. Tell us a bit about yourself, a bit about your background and your journey.
Yeah, sure. No problem. So, as you can hear from my accent and my name, I was born in the UK, but my mom's from St. Kitts. My dad's from Zimbabwe. She hates the story my mom does, but they met in a nightclub in Nottingham. And then they didn't have me in a nightclub in Nottingham. They did get married, and then we moved to Zimbabwe when I was 5. So, and I went to a great school in Zim, and then I moved back when I was sort of just before my 17th birthday, so 3 months before my 17th birthday, and that was basically it. So for me, I kind of enjoyed school. But it was mainly to hang on my mates and play football and do that type of stuff. It was never the academic side. I probably knew from a really early age that I wanted to go into business. By the time the word entrepreneur didn't really exist, but I had my uncle who had gone from being a really successful salesman to opening up his own kind of car parts import business. He had a nice car, had a gold card, BMW 7 Series, and I was like, wow, what's this all about? How do you, kind of do that? And I remember that always being the first thing that played in my mind. And it wasn't necessarily the lifestyle. It was more the fact that he had people working for him. He would kind of go and play squash at 10 o'clock in the morning and all that type of stuff. So that was the beginning of that journey. So kind of came over here. I first trained as a chef. Didn't really enjoy being a chef, not because I don't love cooking, but because it wasn't really a career choice. And it's a key part of the story when you look at the journey, because that was my first experience of kind of careers and being advised and given some guidance on that. So I kind of went to college, got my qualifications, and then I fell into recruitment. And that was kind of, the best career to be part of. And that was truly probably the second phase of my entrepreneurial journey, because that then led to me kind of setting up my first entrepreneurial business or startup, if you want to call it that, which is called Into Ambition. And that was focused on how do we change the world of careers for young people in schools and colleges across the UK. And that was born on the back of kind of working with a lot of companies, helping them to recruit talent, both at executive level, right down to kind of early careers in my recruitment career, and sort of sitting down with them going, well, listen, can you help my nephew, my niece, my son, my daughter around careers advice? And me thinking, well, what's happening here? You guys should have access to all this information, doing some research and finding out, wow, there's nothing there. And then kind of thinking back to my journey and then kind of my friends' journeys and thinking, hold on here, we've got a chance to kind of change something. And that's what we did with Into Ambition. So we went on that kind of journey. But we'll talk more around, how that went. And then obviously, like every entrepreneurial journey, where you start isn't always where you finish. So kind of going back to do my MBA, kind of working in organizations to gain some more experience and then re-embarking on that journey again now with FutureMatch.
Awesome journey. And I've got here that you scaled that first startup from 2 to 45 people. I'd really want to dive deep into that sort of scaling experience. In terms of building a team and raising investment, the two are, they're the norms in startups. You're going to have to do it eventually, but they're quite tricky to get right, and getting the money in is always stressful. So tell us about that experience. How did you handle it, and how do you overall how did you find the whole experience?
Oh yeah, I mean, I think the whole scaling experience was an eye-opener, right? And I think for me, if you imagine, I went from having this idea on a piece of paper, I did my first, what was then, wasn't even a pitch, but I turned up in a careers event, and I made this pitch, a careers event talking about, how we could change the face of careers. And I had two schools walk up to me, the head of careers, and say, listen, I want you to, can you come into our school? And one of those actually became a client of ours, at the time. And sort of, they were the kind of, the beginning of that scaling piece of that journey. And the client is still a close friend right now, because we share a lot of a passion that he had for what you're trying to do at school. So being able to kind of go to that, and then kind of walking away that day thinking, okay, this is interesting. I've got a customer. I've never done anything in careers. I'm coming from this on the career space from a recruitment background. How do we model this? So then kind of modeling that together, and then kind of thinking, okay, there's something that works, and then sending off my first invoice, where he said to me, listen, come and deliver some workshops in the school and, invoice me. I was like, okay. To then thinking, I think we're onto something here, because there's more coming on board. How am I going to do this? So I brought a co-founder on board. So that was, a good experience as well. Trying to find someone who kind of shares the same passion that you have, but also complements your skill set. And then with the co-founder I brought on board, she already had a team of about 12 people already. So it was kind of like in taking on 12 people who were from a kind of much more events marketing background. And then we're kind of talking about what we're doing from a careers perspective. So there was 12 people who've never been involved in careers, but felt connected because the story was relative, and we, kind of identifying their own backgrounds around that story, to then trying to mold this careers journey. So that was quite interesting. So those 12 come on board. We then go through them, the kind of the ups and downs of, you're literally trying to kind of wash your face every single day. You can't do everything you want to do. You're going out on this investment round that probably took us about 9-10 months to raise the money. And, you're spending a lot of time raising money, and then you're trying to also at the same time keep your business and the product and what you're trying to do evolving and developing and all that type of stuff, to then thinking, right, I remember the day, I think it must have been like the 17th of December, we kind of sealed the deal, and we got our first 150 grand raised. And that was a game changer, because what at that time, by the time we got to that, we'd already increased our team to about 18 people. We'd brought on a kind of a training piece to our organization as well. And the mindset change that happened for the team as well was quite interesting, where you've gone from having a team that kind of were part of the struggles per se, to now all of a sudden we've got investors, we've got cash in the bank, but now we've actually got to deliver. So that was quite an interesting experience of the mindset change and some of the challenges that we had with that mindset change. So yeah, that was a big experience, because all of a sudden everything you're putting on hold, you could now do freely, but you had to be really smart about how you did it. You then had a team where you kind of saying to people, right, we're going to increase this team by another 10 people this year. And it's like, okay, then those 10 come on board, and everyone's kind of like, well, hey, Carl, Kufa, you weren't part of the journey at the beginning. We could talk to Kufa and Jane anytime we wanted to. All of a sudden, we're like, oh my God, we've been put in investor meetings, with customer meetings, with product meetings. You got all these different dynamics coming into play. So that was really, really kind of interesting in terms of how you bring the kind of team. And those are some of the lessons I've learned, right? We'll talk later on about the experiences you have and how they shape you. But it's that learning of that. I think when I look back at that time, is actually there's decisions you should make a lot quicker. So for instance, I think the team that took us to raising our first tranche of investment, we should have changed really quickly into the team that could scale us, if that makes sense. Instead of we wanted to give those individuals the opportunity to make a difference and be part of their success, but actually it was probably the wrong idea. It was the wrong choice. We should have, there was one or two of them that were brilliant to do that, and they absolutely started swimming. A lot of them started to sink. So we probably should have done things a bit differently. I think from raising investment perspective, blimey, when we did it, this was like 2012, 2013, right? So the investment landscape that exists today didn't exist then. And I know it's only like 10 years ago, but it was massively different, right? Angel investors were literally very far and few between, and VCs didn't have the amount of money they have now, and we'll see what happens going forward. But there wasn't that kind of level of investment coming into play, so we had to kiss a lot of frogs. And that's a whole podcast in its own, right? If I tell you the amount of meetings we had, the discussions we had, we had someone who kind of came in and they wanted to invest, and they were like, we'll invest 100 grand, and we're like, oh wow, we've done it, we've done the deal. That person goes to Portugal on holiday. We thought, right, we've got the team, we've got everything agreed, and they just came back on the Wednesday. They went on the Friday, long weekend away, and they came back and said, we're not investing. I've changed my mind. I was like, what do you mean you change your mind? How can you change, how does that work? We've got, and all that type of stuff. And then there's one guys that came on board and, they were going to invest another 200, which is more than what we wanted. And then we kind of find out that actually when it came down to show us the color of your money, they didn't have the money, right? So it's like, whoa, this is just, madness. At the same time, every time you get a good piece of advice or a breakthrough, you say to the team, hey, guess what? We've got new investors coming on board. It's looking like this. And then you have to go back and say, oh, I'm really sorry that didn't really work out the way we thought it was going to work out. And so you're having to manage. So you go back to the scaling experience. You're having to kind of manage those emotions because you're dealing with those emotions. And we did have, I remember honestly, we came close a couple of times where we literally were on payday and we had to go to the team and say, oh, listen, can we delay wages for 48 hours, right? Because we've got money coming in, but that customer isn't paying us. We need to change the terms of that agreement. So you're going to that customer and you're saying, listen, can you pay us a little bit earlier? But you don't want to say to them, can you pay us earlier because that kind of helps our cash flow. How do I have that conversation without them thinking, oh, you guys are struggling, so I don't want to work with you. So you kind of, then you have, you kind of go, right, okay, it's my team, right? So team changing all those type of things. So yeah, there's a lot of learnings that kind of came from that and that whole sort of journey. But yeah, scaling a team, the critical, there's a lot of learnings from that. Get the right people that you need in the roles. Don't be afraid to kind of go, listen, thank you for where you took us up to here. This isn't going to be the right thing for the next stage. Communication is such a crucial thing.
Yeah, it's so fascinating. Spinning all these plates and one is going to fall off, maybe two is going to fall off and smash. It's so fascinating. And I think young entrepreneurs coming into this, they just think getting investments like ordering something off Uber Eats. It's like that quick. It's like, no, it will take 9 months possibly. It's not like a quick win. It's like, oh, I've got a brilliant idea. Hi, Mr. VC, do you want to give us some money? It's like, it's a long game. And sometimes it doesn't come off. And on the people side, so important because scaling from a tight-knit group of people to loads of different people, like as you said, is like we were here from the start and all that sort of stuff. Getting them to buy into that sort of environment, and you want to keep what you had at the start, that tight-knit group, and you try to keep it across 45 employees. It's tricky, but it's really fascinating to understand.
It is absolutely that, and I look back now at that journey. My co-founder was absolutely brilliant. She was like, you know what, we need to have our mission, our values, and what we stand for pretty much ironed out. And so, what started off was just kind of like 5 or 6 of us. Then all of a sudden, you got more people coming on board. So we spent a lot of our time just kind of fostering that team collective. And really kind of getting a team. At the same time, you're delivering out there to customers, etc. Then you start to put a structure in place where we kind of had someone who heads up marketing, sales, etc. And those individuals reporting into you. And for me, I think the biggest learning I took is I was, because I was the founder. I was in essence everybody was like buying into me and what we were trying to do. It was my biggest lesson I learned is now I'm kind of learning how to kind of disconnect myself as much as I can from even as FutureMatch starts to grow. It's that kind of right. I'm going to recruit the first 5 leaders and managers of the team, right? And then I'm going to back away and let them do what they do, and not necessarily. I want to be accessible, but not in the way I was at Into Ambition. Into Ambition, I kind of knew everybody's problem, and that became my problem. And I had that open door policy, which is great, but at the same time, it was distracting because when it came to making decisions, I kind of felt emotionally involved with, that kind of like, oh man, I know that person, and if they weren't happy about something, they'd come to me and go, I'll get messages, Kufa, so-and-so said this, so yeah, there's a lot of lessons you learn in terms of, right, how am I going to scale this business properly, and also, I always say that, when you get investment in your company, the most important thing is you have a duty of responsibility for both your investors' capital, but also for the people that you're working at. And it does change your mindset because everybody looks at you. And people think, oh, you got 150 grand. We ended up raising, we went through 5 or 6 rounds. So the total ended up being about 1.4 million. And how we raised it was very different. But every time people think you got investors and you got capital, and they think that, it's all good now. I was like, no. It's far from good. It's actually even harder than what it was when we didn't have anything. Because when we didn't have anything, we were responsible for how we made our lunch look, right? All of a sudden, we've got to show that we not only have we got lunch prepared, dinner looks like this, right? So, it's a whole different mindset. So I say to everyone, look, getting money in is one thing. It's what you do with it next that's even more critical. Because, and I
Yeah.
mean, everything, even your suppliers kind of look at you and go, oh, yeah, you guys raise investment. That's brilliant, right? So you want a new website? Well, that's going to be 15 grand. Well, no, when I came to you, I told you we're bootstrapping, didn't have enough money. You were like, oh, we'll do a deal, 5 grand. You can pay over 2 months. Now you hear about investment. You're like, give me 15 grand for it and pay up front. How?
So quick to help now that you've got money in.
Oh, yeah, yeah. It's an interesting phase.
But you are right. Going from 0 to 2 is just a phase. 2 to 10 is a phase. In getting investment in, all that investment meetings and actually getting it, that's just one phase. And then, you go again once the money's in. I think a lot of people just think, oh, we've got money in now, we can sit back, relax, go to the beach or something. But it's not. It's like
Yeah,
the
yeah,
hard work starts again.
yeah.
In Kufa, how would you describe your style as an entrepreneur?
That's a really good question. Well, I had to do some research now, and I thought, I'll talk to a couple of people and probably look at myself. And I think for me, it was like innovation, right? For me, I'm really excited by bringing something new to market that is going to change how we kind of work or how we live. And it's looking at not necessarily, some people come in and say, I want to revolutionize how things are done, where it's climate change and all that type of stuff. I wouldn't say that I'm that kind of person, but what I'm more looking at a sector like what we're doing in Future Matches, we're focusing on that early careers piece. And it's kind of saying, well, how do we change what is already an industry that's doing things a certain way, but how can we bring something innovative into that space that will transform what is happening? It won't necessarily revolutionize it, but it will transform what's going on. So I think that's how I kind of see myself as an entrepreneur, a bit more innovative, always looking at new ways of how things can be done. How quickly can we do those things? How can we bring something into play that will change what is happening right now, and especially within the space? So people always say to me, whilst I'm obsessed and in love with what I'm doing in Future Match, I can't help but look at what else are we doing. What else can we do? What else do I do outside of Future Match? Where are the other challenges happening around the space to say the future of work overall?
I think it's the typical entrepreneurial spirit. You're working on one thing, and then you're like, there's a problem in that other industry though that I quite like. Maybe I can do that as well. But you're like, no, I have to focus on this one.
Yeah,
Got too many ideas.
I need to write it down. I literally write it down. I write it down. So I'll come back to you. I'll come back to that one another day.
Yeah, it happens so often. In Kufa, what was the main motivation for you to become an entrepreneur?
Yeah, it's a good question as well. I mean, for me, it was like, as I said, the story when I look behind, I see my uncle and kind of the lifestyle that he had, and it wasn't a flashy lifestyle. I just loved the fact that I felt like he was in control of his own destiny. He had created something that was employing people, that created wealth, not just for himself, but the people that were associated in his business. So I thought I love that. I thought there's a reason to make a difference for me. It's how do we kind of leave that little bit of a difference on the market, on the space. And I just love the freedom of that kind of ability to go out there and make a change. You know what I mean? So, I said to you, and I was in recruitment and I love recruitment, and now I'm doing something that's a combination of both. But it's how we make that difference. How do we make that kind of opportunity to do that differently and to create that kind of wealth? For me, it's if someone said to me, what does Future Match look like? It's something that will be going on, hopefully 10, 15 years after I've kind of exited from the business, right? So you can look back and go, wow, that's a legacy, right? That's still done something there. And even into ambition, the fact that it was recognized by the careers enterprise as a beacon for careers, right? That to me was a big enough difference that we'd show that we'd already made that difference. So yeah, that's a core driver for me. Is how can I make a difference and be in control of making that difference?
I think that's so powerful. Just looking back and reflecting and say, we did that. We did something good there. I think that's really empowering as well and motivating for whatever you do next. I think it's so beautiful. So Kufa, what challenges are you currently tackling or you've overcome throughout your entrepreneurial journey?
I think the biggest one has been fascinating, right? It's a big debate right now. I think for me, it's raising finance, raising investment as a Black founder. I think that's been a massive challenge. And I've been lucky enough to do this as a co-founder as well as a solo founder. So, and also my co-founder in the first startup was female. So it's quite interesting to see that, having been on probably the two ends of the investment raising spectrum where everyone talks about it. The fact that you look at the percentage of investment that goes into female founders, so small, so minutiae, and then you look at the same challenges that black founders have, and then you put the two together, and I can honestly say, yeah, it's a challenge, right? So I think now raising finance as a black founder is probably one of my biggest challenges, because obviously I've got a really good team in place and we're growing that team, etc. But I'm looking, our investment round, for instance, is different from it's gone back to the route I didn't want it to go back into, which is we're kind of raising a little bit here, raising a little bit here, and you hear other founders who kind of get £1 million put in straight away. You're like, well, hold on here, how do you do that? But yeah, so that's just how it is. So I think that's probably one of the key challenges that I'm facing so far. In overcoming that, is that whole kind of, well, listen, we know that it's about meeting the right investor, right? So, I've been lucky enough to already have 2 investors who've come on board and said, look, you know what, we kind of love what you're doing. We want to back where you're going with this. And funny enough, they're female investors, which is even more empowering for me and for what we're trying to do. So yeah, it's now, so to me, that's how we've overcome that. We've got 2 investors who understand the journey, and also that kind of always raising. So we're always raising. I don't think we get to say we ever close our funding round. We just kind of keep on going. We've got allocated amount that we've got willing to raise. But yeah, I think my biggest challenge at the moment is how we're going to, the investment raise piece. Also the product build, we're trying to build something really fast on a very small budget. So, and we want to go to market in October. So it's like, right, we need to get this done, and how we're going to do that. So it's overcoming that challenge. It's just being able to utilize the small, limited amount of finance you have to maximize what you want to deliver. So that once you deliver that and you start to build your traction, the rest will follow as it comes along.
It's so fascinating, because being any founder going through that raise and investment, it's hard enough without the added pressure of being a black founder or being a female founder. It just seems unnecessary. It's like, the idea is brilliant, back the idea. The founders are motivated, back the founders. If it's a great idea, you just got to go for it. And I think it just adds that added stress when it's unnecessary. If it's good and the people are good, go for it. And I'm glad you brought that up, because it is still a big issue, not just in startup world, but throughout the world. So
yeah, I think so. And it's I was talking to one of my mentors, 3 or 4 that I've got around, and he said, he just reminded me that the biggest challenge is that you can't, just like I say to people, you can't be what you can't see. When you sit in front of VCs, they are seeing what they are, in front of them. So they, so they see a female founder, and who are they subconsciously connecting to, right? Is what's driving how they kind of give that funding out towards. And so that's why, I told to everybody, and I say to everyone, if and when we're successful enough and I exit this business, I'm definitely going back into the investment world, right? Because for me, we've got to get more of us investing again in businesses, more of us taking the lead in VCs, both male and female and black founders, or people of color, whatever that is in your background, right? Because the more of you in that space, then that's when you start to bring that diversity of thinking. I talk about diversity as not just being, gender or ethnic background. It's more around the thinking, right? And also that ability to kind of connect, because I can recognize, okay, I'm looking at your idea and you're looking at me, and there's a connection. And because that's the reality. I think when you look at investment, the VCs kind of backing what they feel comfortable with. And as much as we don't want to have it, we have it, right? We have that kind of subconscious bias that kind of goes, okay, this is a really good idea, but I can't connect. I can get on with you and all that type of stuff, but there is a barrier that comes in to that process.
Having more diversity is beautiful, because it'll just spawn more collaboration, it'll spawn more innovation, it'll spawn more entrepreneurs taking that leap of faith and getting into this game. I just think more diversity is needed, because once that happens, it becomes a beautiful space. Let's move on to a couple of your own experiences as an entrepreneur. Tell me a rewarding moment, and please tell me a frustrating moment that you might have had along the way.
Yeah, I think for me, the rewarding moment was, as I said, with Into Ambition, I look at that and I go back to us raising investment. our product being recognized as a beacon for careers, appearing in the parliamentary review around all things careers. And, the reality is that, the Careers Enterprise used a lot of what we're doing now to shape that strategy, because the CEO of Careers Enterprise came in and saw what we did. So to me, that was really satisfying. I think, kind of restarting, taking FutureMatch, bringing our investors on board, but also starting to have those early stage conversations with customers, and they kind of going, "Hey, Kufa, I love the fact that, you come back in the space again, and this looks really interesting. How are you going to build this out? And, we would be interested in being part of that." So it's nice to kind of get that early stage validation, and kind of starting to see how those things are kind of happening. I think the frustrating thing is, for me, it's not necessarily the journey itself, but the kind of the noise that we have around that. So I go back to the fact that, let's talk about the journey of being an entrepreneur being something that is going to be more than just 2 steps, right? You're going to have to work really hard to get through there. That yes, you might not be raising investment as fast as you want to, but it doesn't stop you kind of doing things the certain way. And also to say to everyone, there is so many different ways of skinning a cat, right? You do not have to say this is the only way you're going to do it, right? So I was in a session, and they were talking about how do you go about getting your product out to users. And I'll say to every founder, I get frustrated because we always think that there's only one way of doing everything. There's multiple different ways of doing the same thing. So my frustrating part is that kind of, it's not necessarily about what we're doing as a startup, what we're doing as a business right now. It's more around the noise that comes around how do you go to market and how do you get your first customers on board. And it's got to look like how it looked for Amazon, Uber, or whatever it is, when it doesn't.
No, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's part of the reason why I do the podcast. It's like, you could have problem A, another founder could have problem A, but the way you tackle that problem is completely different, but you've got to a successful goal. I think that's an amazing thing about it. And I've been in those talks where it's just like, you must do this. This is the step-by-step guide of getting X, Y, and Z. And he's like, maybe I could do that a bit differently,
Yeah. And I have to, because otherwise where's my differentiator, right? Where am I different from everyone else? Because it's always an interesting thing.
If there was a play-by-play book of how to successfully scale a startup and be a unicorn and everything, everyone would have that book. But the fact there isn't a book just shows you how crazy and wild and wacky this roller coaster can be. So people giving you step-by-step guides, be like,
Exactly. And I always say, again, it's a game of opinions, right? I've started meetings where we pitch for work, and the customer's gone, yeah, but the space you're in is saturated. And you go, oh, okay, is it? How do you work that out? Oh, I've seen 10 companies, but are they all doing early career recruitment? Oh, no, but they're doing recruitment. Well, no. Yes, they're doing recruitment, but are they doing early careers recruitment? No, they're not. So how you define that it's saturated? But that's because, we go back to the whole type of thing, I've got a distinct kind of playbook of how I assess opportunities. My understanding of the market is here, and therefore that's what it looks like. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, it's so interesting and fascinating just to see how people tackle different things and the outcomes of that.
Yeah.
Kufa, on this podcast, we like to give back to younger entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs stepping into this world for the first time. So what would you say are the top 3 skills entrepreneurs should have trying to tackle this chaotic world?
Yeah, so that's a really good. That made me kind of go and do some thinking, right? Because I thought, let me just look back at my journey and look at what we can, move away from, probably from the standard stuff. Our perseverance, self-belief, honesty, transparency. Yeah, we know that, right? So for me, it was communication is number 1, right? Because remember, to communicate, you need to be able to present your vision, right? So not only to potential investors, to potential customers, to stakeholders, to new staff coming on board. So the ability to communicate in every form, right? Both in person, in writing, and whether it's email or whatever you want to do. I think that's a really, really important skill to have. Okay. I think sales is another thing. So I've been in many meetings of, my background is sales, right? So selling, I love selling. I'm not a techie from background, but I've sat in meetings before, and a techie founder will say to me, oh yeah, but I'm not really good at selling. I'm like, well, yeah, you are, because you're pitching. You clearly want to change the world, and you believe that your product is the best. Well, that's a form of selling, right? So I said to anyone, kind of get yourself that kind of sales experience, be uncomfortable in that aspect, but sales is going to be a really important thing, because again, you have to sell your business, whether it's to customers, whether it's to investors, whether it's to new staff coming on board, So my philosophy, and I drive a lot of my friends mad, because every time we go anywhere, they'll say to me, "Oh my God, how much do you want to bet? How many I think the one on Saturday was, how many beers do we want to get here that Kufa will basically walk out here with, either having discussed with 4 potential students about what the FutureMatch is doing, and probably link them to 4 companies that he knows of already." And that happens every single time, because I can't help it. You sit down, you start talking to people, and you're like, and they're like, "Oh my God, my son, yeah, great." So it's always that sales piece that kind of comes into place. And then the last one is learning, right? This journey, whatever you do, you have to be prepared to learn, right? Do not take offense because a VC tells you, actually, that's not for us, or listen, you need to just give up this idea. Whatever it is, learn from it. Every time you go and do something, you take out an experience. What was positive? What was negative? What can I do better? Always, yeah. To me, that's like, those are the 3. If you can, ability to communicate, ability to sell, but learning is so important. It's like probably the top one of all of them, in my view. The more you can learn from every experience you go through, I think it improves what you do as an entrepreneur going forward. And yeah, everyone knows about the rest, right? But those, to me, are the 3 things.
Yeah, and thank you for those 3. I couldn't agree more. I think sales, I think people fail to look beyond the word sales. I think with sales, there's a lot of people skills that come with it, and sort of self-confidence and all these other things that you don't necessarily see straight away. So I think anyone, if you pitch in being the salesman or anything, it's just working on those people skills. And I love that you're always looking for potential clients when you're out for a few beers with friends. I think that's brilliant.
Always. I'm always ABS, always be selling as well, and that's my recruitment background. We were told that, we had to always try to be selling. And I think another thing with sales, the first thing I think about is, I'm thinking of my cold calls. I'm thinking of, double glazing sales, they still exist, whatever that is. And so we have that negative view of what the sales mean. But sales means that every single time someone says to you, Carl, what do you do then? That's my sales pitch, right? Straight away, what do I do? That's my sales pitch. And when you start to look at it that way, it becomes different. So even my own son, the other day he came back from school and he's like, "Oh, Dad, my friends were asking, what do you do?" I'm like, there you go. So I'm kind of talking to him about that, and I'm practicing my 30-second elevator pitch in different ways, because I'm thinking if my 15-year-old can get it, then it's okay, and if he can't, then he's looking at me quizzically. I'm like, okay, maybe I need to change that and do that. So yeah,
it's smart. It's smart. Yeah, I think a lot of people say it's like, if pitch it to the simplest person you know, and if they get it, you're into a winner.
Yeah. And you get that, and that's why I go back to that whole thing that you're always selling, right? What do? You explain it, and you can throw in 3 different things, and you just watch those reactions. It's a wonderful way of validating what you do as well. And so you're selling, aren't you? So how do those conversations engage?
In Kufa, what advice would you give your younger self?
Okay, I don't know whether I'm allowed to say this, but I basically call it JFDI. I don't know if you've heard of that.
No, please explain.
No? Okay. Yeah. Just fucking do it.
Yes. Okay. Now I know.
That's it. Yeah. I know whether you can edit this part, but for me, just do it. Right. That's the advice to my younger self. Right. I think I spent a lot of time probably overthinking things and trying to do things differently, or listening to because how can I say, it's quite interesting. Your learning piece. People say, "Oh, if you're not listening to what other people say, then are you learning?" And I'm going, "Oh, there's a big difference, right? Learning is about taking out what they've said underneath, the kind of the advice, and then you kind of learn from what I've done and how I've done it." But that whole, there's a lot of people that will say to you, "Oh man, I wouldn't do that. That's quite scary." Oh, that's not a learning experience. That's me. That's someone telling me I can't, and therefore I've just got to do it. Yep. I've just got to believe in what I'm trying to do. So my younger self, I probably spent a lot of time being told, "Oh, you're trying to do that, but that's not a job, that's not a career, that's not all that type of stuff." When actually it's just about going for it. And so, and I've tried that. I've done that with my own son, right? My son, his potential, his ambition is to become a pro footballer. He's got decent level, he's got the ability and all that type of stuff. And instead of sitting there and going to him, "Oh, you know what, this is the way to go about it," I've gone, absolutely, you go for it. The reality is that there's 5% that make it, and the 5% that make it, they're prepared to work harder than everyone else, right? They're prepared to live this kind of life, this sort of type of stuff. And if you're prepared to do that, you go for it. And you have my 100% support in whatever you want to do. And because of that's my learning experience with my younger self, going, if someone said to me, I came out and said, I want to be an entrepreneur. They said, go for it. I would have been in a different space right now. So yeah, that's my advice. JFDI. That's what I say.
Love it. I love it. And I think when you have that attitude, if you don't necessarily reach your goal, you've still got that self-belief and confidence of going for it. You've got over that fear of that question. It's like, oh, what if? But you've actually gone for it, and then that's just the start of a journey, and that's beautiful.
I was saying, when you go for it, you might not necessarily reach what you deem to be the kind of the top, but actually you're pretty close, because you end up on on a kind of a different pathway, right? But because you've gone for it, it's tough. I always say to people, the minute you start doing something, you'd be surprised how many avenues and roads start to open up because you've just gone for it. So that's the whole process. It's about just go for it, and then don't worry about it. It will all fall in. You all falls in place as you go along. I remember the last point. One of my mentors said to me, "When you're driving your car and you've got your headlights on, how far do you see?" And I said, "Well, only as far as the headlight." He goes, "Exactly. You can only see as far as your headlights are showing. So therefore, you don't worry about what's around the bend until your headlights show you around the bend." And that's the same thing with the younger self. Don't worry about, what happens just get on the journey, start that journey. You put your directions in your sat nav, you put your headlights on, off you go, right? As long as you got enough fuel in your tank, and you might run out of fuel and you might worry about that, that's fine. But you have to start that journey.
I love that analogy. That's a great analogy to end the podcast on.
Thank
Kufa, thank you for your time today. Please, lastly, just let people know what they should check out, where they can connect with you.
Yeah, sure. So, FutureMatch, we're on LinkedIn. The new website is coming on board by September, but we've got one called www.mypam.tech, which was our name before we changed to FutureMatch. So you can get hold of them on Twitter, Kufa at _FutureMatch, on LinkedIn as well. So please feel free to connect on all those type of stuff. We do our own kind of career hype podcast as well. So we talk about different careers happening and what's going on in the world of early careers. And we've got tips and hints for organizations and for early careers talent themselves as well.
Kufa, once again, thank you for joining me on Founder Sessions. Love hearing your journey. Love hearing your analogies and your advice that we can pass on to future entrepreneurs. But from myself and Kufa, this has been Founder Sessions, and thank you.